The only question now is if you can get this deal or worse. If Vladimir Putin will settle with the Donbass and Crimea, or if he wants war, or if he wants more. Yeah, that's why you don't get yourself into stupid wars that you can't win.
So recently, Dave Smith covered the recent peace deal on the table between Russia and the United States that Trump is negotiating with Putin as we speak now. And he gets into why this off-ramp that's being presented to us now is the only hope to get out of this thing, to disengage. It's now or never. And he chimes in on all the ramifications of this and what this means for that theater going forward. So let's get his take. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
The news, the very major news that's happened, just unfolded over the last few days, is that Donald Trump, in his 4D chess art of the deal negotiating strategies, has now, which I would think of as just more incoherent than anything else, but has now pivoted away from last week. He was on Vladimir Putin better have a ceasefire by this deadline or there'll be hell to pay. And by hell to pay, it means sanctions and money for weapons or whatever, the same old thing. He completely dropped that. He's now announced, after Witkoff went and met with Vladimir Putin, it's now been announced that Donald Trump is meeting with Vladimir Putin in a couple of days in Alaska. As of now, no Zelensky, just the two of them. But now we are at least back to the posture of we're trying to make a deal here. And we're trying to end this war. And Trump even said a couple things today about how he thinks he's optimistic about that they can make a deal. So the tone of everything has completely changed. And for the first time since this war is broken out, the president of the United States of America and Vladimir Putin are sitting down in a room together, which itself is just is a great thing. And it's criminally insane that has not happened yet. Like, it literally is like, I feel like as a father of little children, I'm so embarrassed that this is the adult world. Like, I'm so glad I don't have to tell them about this yet. Because
yeah, Dave's right. I mean, it's been so childish from Trump in so many ways, so many ebbs and flows in this whole thing. I was so super elated when he opened conversations with Putin as soon as he stepped into the Oval Office just about. But from there, it's been a series of escalations and threats for sanctions and secondary tariffs and parroting some of the same propaganda we heard from CNN and the Biden regime about how Putin wants all of Ukraine and all this nonsense. So this is a good step. No doubt about it. It's going to be interesting to see all the considerations and all of the actionable things that are being discussed here. But I think, we miss the forest for the trees if we don't get back to what is the base desire of Russia, and that it's no Ukraine in NATO. That's something they've always said. That's their biggest demand. And that's the most reasonable demand, because the U.S. wouldn't accept Mexico in BRICS being supplied with military equipment, and by the way, Russia regime changing the government in Mexico. So yeah, we'll have to see how this unfolds, but I'm with Dave. This is a good development, certainly a better development than talking about idle threats that haven't changed the battlefield conditions for Ukraine whatsoever.
Man, it's gonna hurt to let them know someday that, like, oh yeah, I know you always thought the adults kind of had it together a little bit, but now it turns out we don't at all. But think about it. Two countries that are in possession of 90% of the world's stockpiles of nuclear weapons, that's Russia and America, are in a proxy war on Russia's border, and they're not communicating. There has been no meeting between the commanders in this war until now. So anyway, it's great that it's happening. It's great that Trump has reversed course here. Let's hope for the best.
Totally agree. The one thing I'll say is they have talked on the phone many times, it seems like, throughout this conflict, but that is a big step. It is maybe kind of reminiscent of the meetings between Reagan and Gorbachev in places like Reykjavik, and hoping the seeds of those conversations pan out here and are more reminiscent of what unfolded there and the dissolution of the Soviet Union, which was the end of the Cold War. Well, we sort of have a new Cold War now, and it's not going in the right direction if you're someone that's a non-interventionist and wants to ease tensions with the rest of the world, including Russia. You know, the government, we're told, is this Hitlerian empire, and that Putin is some kind of figure that's trying to reconstitute the Soviet Union. It's absurd. We could have good relations with Russia and trade with Russia, but we can't do that unless we agree to peace terms. And we are far beyond needing peace terms in this war.
A few interesting dynamics. Like one of them is, which I think plays a role in this, but evidently, since Donald Trump's first kind of turn against Zelensky, and him, you know, like saying we're going to cut off the aid. And they really, even though he did ultimately reverse on that, it's not like aid packages have been coming in the way they were under Joe Biden. And it seems that this has had this mixed with other factors, I guess, like just like how prolonged and bloody the war's been. But there has been a collapse in support for the war amongst the Ukrainian people. It's now, there was just a Gallup poll out about this, and there was a big piece written up by Gallup that it's like 68 or 69%. It's like super majorities of the Ukrainian people support a negotiated peace immediately. And that means land, concessions.
And I wonder why they're plucking old men off the streets to serve in this military, this campaign that isn't retaking territory in the Donbass almost at all. And it makes sense because there were wide-scale protests in Ukraine just a week or two back that wasn't covered by much of the mainstream media, where people are rising up in opposition to Zelensky for really the first time. They're having a hard time putting the toothpaste back in the tube because Zelensky has done a lot to crack down on political dissent, outlaw rival political parties, outlaw oppositional news media, etc. But this is becoming palpable for the first time, and I think that is a serious change as well. That's worth noting and considering.
And so that is, I'm sure, is a big factor of this too. That, it's funny because throughout the whole thing, I didn't get to make this point on the panel today, but I should have. But it's like throughout this whole thing, we've heard, oh, the Ukrainian people want to fight. The Ukrainian people want to fight. Well, now look at this. Super majorities of them don't want to fight anymore. And yet the people advocating for the war just keep advocating for it because this is how war propaganda works.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And if they wanted to fight, fine, but you're not entitled to the U.S. Treasury to do so. That was always my stance. If the Ukrainian people wanted to fight back, great. I just don't want my country involved in it, my tax money involved in it for the sake of empire building. And that's what the U.S. government criminally always does in these kind of affairs.
One piece falls away and you just keep advocating for it. Oh, yeah, there aren't weapons of mass destruction, but we were always here to bring democracy. You move on to the next justification for the war. But from what I understand, it's at least I've seen it being reported. Now, who knows? I guess we'll find out more about this. But it's been reported that Putin is at least signaling that which is a little bit of them stepping down from the position they were in before, that he's basically conceding he's signaling that he might be willing to accept. We'll take Donetsk, Luhansk, and Crimea, and then and a corridor like from some of those territories they have on the south to Crimea.
Yeah, I think that he still wants to keep much of Kherson and Zaporizhia. I haven't followed this super closely, but that would make sense, and that would signal something of a departure from wanting the entire Donbass, of which they basically control, by the way. So this is remarkably, I think, remarkably charitable by him. If your military is occupying something like 85% or 90% of the Donbass, to be willing to take, something like 70% of it, that would be, remarkably charitable when all Zelensky has done is reject all potential peace overtures, including at Istanbul, where he would have gotten a lot more territory, by the way. So again, we'll have to see how this pans out. Crimea was never going back to Ukraine. We'll have to see if this pans out, what regions of the Donbass would go back to Ukraine. But that Putin's open to this is probably a big deal. But I don't think it's as big of a deal as it is that Ukraine can't be part of NATO. It has to be neutral. You have to withdraw, NATO assets and military equipment from Ukraine as well. That needs to be a buffer zone. That, I think, is more important to Putin than how much of the Donbass he gets back.
But that they'll accept that. And if that's the case, which is a huge if, but if that is the case, then like we'd be crazy to not take that deal at this point. That's pretty much best case scenario, for how to unwind this thing. We're a long way from having the deal done, but we're at a much better point now than we were just last week and certainly for the last few months. So that, I think, is at least something to be optimistic about.
Agreed. I feel the same way. There is a palpable change, but we haven't seen it manifest into policy yet. We've seen Trump be good on the rhetoric on this at times and then pivot back to the same Biden era positions that he blasted on the campaign trail and said he would stop those kind of policies. So we'll have to see how it works out.
It's wild that now people have to somehow go, no, this is bad. We shouldn't be meeting to negotiate a peace. It really is it's like, as even the Ukrainian people don't want to fight anymore. And you're still insisting that they do, insisting that they fight a war that they can't win, when everybody already knows, like, there's not at one point, the guy said to me, and this was what was kind of great of having this general there. So at one point, the guy goes to me and he goes, oh, so that's what you are, Neville Chamberlain, after I told him he was an idiot. And he goes, well, you are Neville Chamberlain. You just want to give Ukrainian territory to Vladimir Putin. Well, I will not give Ukrainian territory to Vladimir Putin. And I went, you're not giving anything. He took it and you can't do anything about it.
Yeah, ever notice that that's the default, that the U.S. has to be the world's policeman if you're an interventionist stooge or neocon like this, and it's just giving territory away if you don't devote your country's treasury to that cause, when, by the way, it's in an inflation crisis, a debt crisis, $37 trillion in debt, and the default is that you're giving it away? Yeah, no, Dave is exactly right. Putin took that territory through a military push, and there's nothing that the U.S. has done to be able to reverse that. $200 billion hasn't reversed that. Do you think $400 billion will? At what cost? At the cost of American groceries and fuel and compounding debt? We won't accept it. Dave is right.
I go, what do you want to do? You want to send in the 82nd Airborne? You want to fight like a World War II style war against Russia with both of us having nuclear weapons, and we'll fight a World War II war that will turn to a nuclear war over whether Luhansk is ruled by Kiev or Moscow?
That is the implication, a nuclear war, because nothing else has panned out. The tariffs haven't worked. The sanctions haven't worked. This drone strike on the nuclear bombers haven't changed the conditions of the battlefield at all. I mean, they're implying the nuclear option, I guess, by saying that this is unacceptable. That's
worth a World War II war to you, that will go nuclear? And, and then he goes, well, we don't have to do that. We can impose sanctions. And I just laughed. I was like, sanctions? And then the general was there. So this helped out because I just went, hey, general, just back me up. You're the military expert here. Sanctions can recover Ukrainian territory. Will you go on record and tell me if that's true or not true? And then he has to go, well, no, sanctions. Anyway, it was.
Great question by Dave. I need to watch this now. I guess this was on Piers Morgan or something. I need to see that for sure. But Dave's a genius about asking the right questions and putting people in those kind of positions.
So just the war can't be won for Ukraine. They're not taking their territory back. The only question now is if you can get this deal or worse. If Vladimir Putin will settle with the Donbass and Crimea, or if he wants war, or if he wants more war and more territory. That's the only debate here now. So let's get this meeting going. If you remember at the very beginning of the war in 22, Joe Biden was saying that we can win the war with sanctions alone, like that we never need to send weapons packages in. That was the first starting point.
And they said that about Cuba and Iran and North Korea as well. They always say that, but it's never worked. It's never caused a regime change or whatever endgame that the empire builders want, and only gives those regimes a new tool of propaganda so that they can blame all their own economic turmoil on foreign countries rather than their own maladministration. That's how this always pans out. It never works. It's idle threats that never work and never pan out.
And he was bragging about how these sanctions were going to destroy the ruble, and it was stronger by the end of the year. So Joe Biden policies did end up destroying the dollar, but that's not at least what he said the goal was supposed to be. And yeah, I mean, look, to your other point, which I do think is a really important one, and I don't like when people say that, hey, when America, withdraws from a war, we look weak on the global stage, and therefore that empowers our enemies. I'm open to the possibility that there's something to that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily entirely a coincidence. And I've seen some reporting on this, although I don't know how solid it is, but that the America retreating from Afghanistan in defeat and disgrace is part of what emboldened Vladimir Putin to go do it. Like, now's the moment when I think I could do this thing. Obviously, there were several other motivations there too, but I'm like open to the fact that there's probably some truth to that. When we look weak, other people might feel a little bit more ballsy. But
yeah, maybe that's the case, but don't you think a nation is stronger if they successfully avert war through diplomacy? That shows more strength than any kind of American empire building scheme that's gone haywire, like the broken nature of the occupations of Afghanistan and Iraq. It just behooves us not to get into these wars because of how that's unfold. Nothing makes the U.S. look weaker than fruitless wars launched so long, because it guarantees you're going to have to get out at some point. The regime change isn't going to work in the same way, the one in Germany did. The only kind of counterexample people bring up in Japan, and those were like 80 years ago. They never point to the examples that go haywire. So again, nothing makes the U.S. look stronger than successful diplomacy. That's real foreign policy. It's, maybe during that foreign policy, you can speak softly and carry a big stick. That's what Roosevelt said, Theodore Roosevelt. I'm not a fan of him as a president, but I think there's truth to that to some extent.
The point is that, that's why you don't get yourself into stupid wars that you can't win.
Right.
That's just a stronger argument for having Ron Paul's foreign policy all the time. And for anyone, you think about this was the argument that they made even as the war was winding down in Afghanistan, when Joe Biden, under Donald Trump's framework, pulled out of the war in Afghanistan. They were saying, oh, well, look weak. We can't turn tail and run. And you're like, dude, we've been here for 20 years. Like, at a certain point, and we've been there for 20 years, and the military we were building up fell in a week. So, what the hell? How, what did we need? Another 20 years to get them through a month or something like that? So obviously you run into the realities of these unwinnable wars, and then you have to get out of there. Eventually the people won't stand for it anymore. And so, the point is, you don't want to get to that position, because then, it does look pretty bad and pretty weak. Okay. I like you said, I agree with your point. I think it's a little overhyped. We've looked weak and bad and pulled out of losing wars in the past, and doesn't result in calamity. But if there is some cost associated with that, then it's just all the more reason why you shouldn't get in these things to begin with.
Exactly right. Dave's last point was his best one in the whole video, I think. It just reveals the absurd, insidious natures of these wars from the starting point. If you can never leave them, but they're going to be fruitless from the start. And even though people said that they weren't winnable from the start, like Ron Paul did in terms of Iraq, you fight those wars, and at some point you do have to leave. And the end extension to saying that you're going to look weak if you negotiate a peace with a nuclear power, then what does it say about the conservatives who backed Ronald Reagan talking to Gorbachev and ending the Cold War on amicable terms, on terms that weren't bloody? It didn't cause civil wars, and a lot of it is because of Gorbachev's restraint and allowing elections to unfold in the Soviet bloc, etc. But what does it say about conservatives that were behind Reagan while he was doing that, and now have the view that you can't negotiate with Putin, who isn't the head of the evil empire. That wasn't Gorbachev or Stalin or Khrushchev. That was Putin that we're talking about now, who doesn't have these mass territorial ambitions, no matter what the war propaganda machine has tried to sell Americans and NATO enthusiasts for years. So yeah, Dave is right. The thing that shows strength most is diplomatically ending wars and not getting into foreign entanglements. It's foreign entanglements that have ended the greatest empires that have ever been in the world. And, you know, empires can only be great to so much of an extent. I mean, I'm not a big fan of any government, to be honest, but republics that don't engage in empire building schemes certainly seem to have a lot more longevity and don't eat themselves from within over the catastrophes caused by wars, by all the debt spending, the inflation they cause, the propensity to which governments violate civil liberties, especially during war. And it's not like we haven't seen that in the US with the DHS and the Patriot Act and the surveillance state. We've seen it time and time again, and it's only amplified over time. So yeah, Dave is right on this. This is the off-ramp that the U.S. has to take. It's now or never. This off-ramp should have been taken long ago, before even 2022, of course. The U.S. should not have couped the democratically elected government of Ukraine, Yanukovych. I mean, that was not a very good idea, by the way. And again, that's something you'll never hear in the mainstream news. They didn't cover that, but the U.S. was deeply involved in that. And we had that leaked tape by Victoria Nuland and Jeffrey Pyatt that discusses who has to be part of the provisional government as proof. So yeah, this is the off-ramp. Let's take it. The territorial swap is a good idea, but I think at the crux of this whole thing, more than any kind of territorial considerations, is Ukraine's status in the world after this war. If they're neutral, if they're not in NATO, and the U.S. commits to pulling out NATO resources, I think that will be much more pleasing to Russia than whatever territory is carved out of the Donbass. I think that's kind of a secondary consideration. It is some of a consideration because the U.S. and Ukraine did nothing to enforce the Minsk II Accord. But at the same time, I think Putin's desire has always been that Ukraine can't be part of NATO. We've known that forever. We've known that since the Niet means Niet memo at the very latest, when William Burns sent that memo to Condoleezza Rice, and you know the Bush administration just said, I don't care, we're gonna go to Bucharest and say both Ukraine and Georgia are gonna be part of NATO. They were fanning the flames of this. We know what they wanted the whole time. And yeah, we would want a buffer zone too. We wouldn't want Canada to be part of their BRICS alliance with arms flowing in with a coup government of Canada, just like the Mexico example I used earlier. So that's where we're at here. But I do want to hear from you. Let me know down below, is Dave right? Is this the last chance to end the war? What's at stake here? And what do you think is the biggest consideration for a Russian acceptance of a peace deal? Is it territorial changes? Is it Ukraine's status? What is it? Let me know down below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also subscribe to Dave Smith. He's awesome, great coverage of this issue. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you will help support the channel, and I'll really appreciate that. And as a gift in return, I'll give you access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.